The program will begin momentarily. And now introducing Alex Moore, Senior Programs Officer at the Pacific Council.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the 6th installment of the Edgerton Series on China, a monthly series open to the public in which we examine how best to approach a rising China. Thank you to the Edgerton Foundation for making this program a reality, and thank you to Jerry Green, our President and CEO, whose office I've commandeered without asking. Sorry about that, Jerry. Joining us today are two world-class experts, Ms. Bonnie Glaser and Rear Admiral Stephen Koehler. Ms. Glaser is the director of the China Power Project and a senior advisor for Asia at CSIS. If you don't already do so, I strongly recommend listening to her podcast entitled China Power. Rear Admiral Koehler is the director of operations at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, where they monitor everywhere from Hollywood to Bollywood and penguins to polar bears. We've had the privilege to visit U.S. Indo-Pacific Command during RIMPAC, and it's really an impressive operation. Thank you both for joining us. And a quick note that the Admiral will be stepping off the call at the 50-minute mark. Also a reminder to our audience that you may participate in the Q&A at any time by submitting your questions through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So with that, thank you again, Rear Admiral Koehler and Ms. Glaser for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and get us started by asking you to give me your best elevator pitch on why should we, the American public, care about the South China Sea. I don't know if Bonnie wants to take that first.
Sure, I'd be happy to take a crack at it. The South China Sea is very large, and according to the work that's been done by my program at CSIS, about $3.4 trillion in trade pass through those waters annually. Of course, the ownership of the rocks and the shoals and cays are important to those countries that claim them, as well as the maritime entitlements that go along with each of those land features. There's significant amount of oil and gas. Most of those is likely along the coastlines of countries in Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, not a claimant to the South China Sea in terms of land features, but its waters abut up against them. And China has been, in fact, challenging those waters. But all of them are engaged in oil and gas exploitation, and it's important to their economies. Enormous amount of fish stocks. All of those countries have a large number of fishermen, and I think they are all quite concerned about the state of the declining fish stocks. So then, of course, there's the issue of just the rules-based order, international law, solving differences peacefully and in accordance with international law. And probably we'll get into the fact that there was a ruling that came down from an arbitral tribunal in July of 2016 that China is not abiding by. And so that's an example of China not being in compliance with a ruling and challenging the rules-based order. And very importantly is freedom of navigation for military vessels, but I'm going to turn that one over to Admiral Koehler.
Great, thank you, Ms. Glaser. I'd hop on to a couple things. One, complete agreement with Ms. Glaser on the economic side of that, and the amount of trade is phenomenal, as well as when you look at all travel through there, 1/3 of it globally goes through that, right? So in addition to the monetary of 3.4 trillion, which I totally agree with, the South China Sea is a waterway for which world trade is enabled, and I think that's important. 1/3 of all crude oil and over half of the liquefied gas rides through there. All of those sea lines of communication, I think, are really important for free and open Indo-Pacific. The rules-based international order that Ms. Glaser talked about, I think, is hugely important. And if you look at the South China Sea as sort of a microcosm and as example of where at least the values that we believe, United States, Indo-PACOM here certainly, And I'd like to thank all the like-minded partners that are with us. This is a example of what rules-based international order is all about. You know, we need to have the access and make it clear that this is for the good of all, and assured access to the maritime commons are important for the entire globe. And I think free and fair trade, in addition to the rights of fishing that Ms. Glasser talked about, the rights of all of the maritime commons are why it's so important, and a complete microcosm of that when we see currently right now, you know, in China's case, really trying to make that more of their own with the 9-dash line and their specific claims to it. And so I think we'll probably get into that. And I won't steal any freedom of navigation questions that I'm sure are going to come that way. But that's why we in the United States here do freedom of navigation in an effort to, you know, accentuate the rules and the law that we all want to live on. And so I'll pause there and we'll see if anything else comes up.
Great, thank you for that. Bonnie, the U.S. recently revised its South China Sea policy. Would you walk us through what exactly these changes were and why they're significant?
Sure. So I've already referenced the July 2016 ruling, and at the time the Obama administration did call on China to comply with the ruling. It is only binding on the two parties engaged in the case, which was China and the Philippines. But at the time, the United States did not clearly say that China's actions were illegal, that its claim specifically to historical rights was illegal. So let me clarify, though, that the United States has not changed, first of all, its position of neutrality on the territorial disputes in the South China Sea. So the United States just has no interest in who owns what. But it's explicitly now taking a position, and this was laid out by Secretary of State Pompeo in this past July, so just 2 months ago. And that position now is that the maritime disputes over water and seabed rights is where the U.S. is taking a clearer position. And what Secretary of State Pompeo had said was Beijing's claims to offshore resources across most of the South China Sea are completely unlawful, as is its campaign of bullying to control them. So this is basically bringing U.S. policy into closer alignment with that 2016 ruling that had found that China has no basis to assert historic rights or make any other claims that are that beyond what is permitted under the Convention on the Law of the Sea. So this essentially nullifies the 9-dash line as the Admiral reference as a claim to maritime space. So China may claim the resources in its EEZ that extends from its southern coast. The tribunal didn't say anything about the northern part of the South China Sea, which is the Paracel Islands. So this really does apply to the Spratlys, but in the future, there might be an extension to the Paracels as well. And essentially, China cannot claim resources that extend that exist in the EEZs, the exclusive economic zones that extend from the coastal states. So it is illegal for China to engage in fishing, in oil and gas exploration, or other economic activities in those areas, or to interfere with its neighbors' rights to do so.
Great, thank you for that. And the United States, I mean, is that, so China, what China is doing is illegal per the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, which the United States is not a signatory of, correct?
The United States has neither signed nor ratified the Convention on the Law of the Sea, but accepts its provisions, I understand, as a matter of customary law. And so ironically, U.S. actions are in compliance with the Convention on the Law of the Sea, although we are not a signatory. China is in violation of the Law of the Sea, even though it is a signatory.
And what is it that's kind of stopping the U.S. from ratifying the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea? Wouldn't we have much more authority on this issue if that was something that we pushed through and not only follow to the letter of the law, but actually participated in with the international community?
My own view is that it certainly gives Beijing a talking point to be able to say that the U.S. is not a signatory of the treaty. But I think that if one pays attention to U.S. actions, that we are essentially in compliance with the provisions. I personally have written that I think that the United States should become a signatory. This is an issue that has become actually a partisan one in the U.S. Congress. Republicans are quite concerned about buying into another multilateral treaty. There are concerns and differences over whether it affects our seabed rights, or although subsequent to the ratification of UNCLOS when it came into force, there have been some steps that have been taken, I think, to address the concerns that existed at the time. So my view is this should be done. The Obama administration said it was going to do it, but it wasn't the top legislative priority for the Obama administration. So my expectation is we would probably need to see a Democratic president, and possibly both houses of Congress with the Democrats in the majority in order to push this through. Maybe that would change with the current environment of greater concerns about Chinese activity, and I personally hope that the U.S. will become a treaty signatory in the near future.
Great, thank you. Admiral Koehler, does the U.S. military have a position on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea? Do you think it would be helpful for us to ratify that, or is that not something the U.S. military has an opinion on?
Yeah, so the military, as you know, taken an actual position on that political issue that Ms. Glasser totally laid out correctly in our judgment. I'm not going to comment on that. I will say, though, in violent agreement with her, is that we adhere to it as a military and as a Navy and all those things. So I'll probably leave it there as far as the military position on that.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to put in front of both of you, why now for this policy shift? You know, has it been a long time coming, or was there a particular kind of catalyst behind the decision of Secretary Pompeo to adjust U.S. policy in the South China Sea in this way?
Yeah, I'll start on that one if you like. First of all, I mean, I think when you look back over the last, 15 years, 8, 10, 15 years, I think there was a specific hope that, the inclusion and working with China was going to, spur on our ability to work together in this region. I think what we've seen most recently is a direct unilateral reasoning of China to impose its will, sort of writ large, but South China Sea, as we mentioned earlier, is an example, has been an impetus for the United States to hold the line then on this particular ruling. One, as an assurance piece for our allies. Two, as an example of rules-based international order and the fact that this is for, as I mentioned at the beginning, good of all, and not a unilateral spot where China can impose its will at the time and place of its choosing against that international law. So that's what I would say is the changes now. It's because China's very clearly making that move, and so there's an opportunity here, as Secretary Pompeo did, to act and stand by for any other comments there.
Great, thank you. Ms. Glasser?
I would just add that in the Obama administration, there was really an emphasis on freedom of navigation. And in our rhetorical statements, there was an absence of discussion about the need to stand up for the rights of other claimants for the resources inside their exclusive economic zones. And I think that the Trump administration has elevated the importance of the latter. And it has made quite clear, most recently, of course, in the statement that was made by Secretary of State Pompeo in July. But even before that, there were very clear statements coming out of the State Department and also out of our Indo-PACOM command, saying that China's harassment of other sea claimants, especially in regard to energy exploitation, was bullying. And now again, we're able to say it's illegal, but we condemned it even before that. So the recent change essentially in the US interpretation of the law just allows us to call this illegal, but we have been moving towards this shift in policy for a number of years in response, again, as the admirals just said, to Chinese behavior taking place in the South China Sea.
And how was this shift received by the region's claimants? I think obviously China was not very happy about it, but I'd be kind of more curious to hear how the other claimants of the region reacted to the United States' shift here. I mean, did they see it as a sign that the United States was more greatly committed to ensuring that China doesn't kind of stake out a stranglehold over the region, or did they just kind of see it as a soft move, a move without any real teeth?
I'll take that one, Alex. First of all, I would say generally that it's been welcomed by the regional claimants, and I'd say that somewhat categorically. Examples of that. Vietnam's foreign minister at ASEAN continues to welcome our contributions to the South China Sea. I think this is an example thereof. There is some pressure that all of the South China Sea claimants continue to be under economically, and all those elements of power that China has over them. And so I think they have to hedge that a little bit. But I would argue that as an example of our commitment to the region, as an example of we are standing up to the values that we have continued to talk about, it's generally looked at as a positive across the region. And I think all of those partners truly realize there's all of their economic reasons and trade that we talked about initially are based on this. And I do think that they have to be a little bit careful as they navigate their political and economic ties that ultimately we'd like to have everybody in agreement with, right? There's no desire to have this be the world against China. What this is a desire is to generate this level of international order and betterment for all. It just appears that way because it's being unilaterally pushed on by China. So that'd be my comments there.
I would just add, there's certainly no country in the region that really wants to be the target of Chinese economic coercion and punishment, which we've seen against the Philippines in particular, in terms of countries in Southeast Asia, but also many other countries in the world. And they don't want to be caught between the US and China and forced to choose. They all have very important economic relationships with China. So the bottom line is that the majority members of ASEAN and certainly the South China Sea claimants are privately very supportive of the clarification of the US position, but they say very little publicly. But we can see some changes in the behavior of these countries as they see the US putting some skin in the game. And I would cite as one example, Indonesia just a few days ago publicly condemning the presence of Chinese Coast Guard vessels in its exclusive economic zone. We've also seen Malaysia issue an important submission to the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, protesting China's claims to the maritime features in the South China Sea. So I think when the US is willing to do more, that other countries do have more confidence. They are more willing to stand up for their own legitimate rights.
Great, thank you. And are there any good examples of countries who kind of publicly come out in support of what the U.S. Has recently done in terms of its policy shift?
The clearest one is Vietnam, as the admiral has just stated, and it welcomed what it said was other countries' positions that are in accordance with international law, and emphasized UNCLOS as the legal framework within which all activities must be carried out, but also pushed back against the notion that U.S. military presence in the region is unhelpful, which the Chinese say, and the Vietnamese certainly strongly disagree with.
This is a question from, go ahead, please.
I would just add one other piece there is just in the last week or few days or so, there's been I think it's the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia kind of specifically have gone to the UN and sort of laid out, hey, there's some claims here that China is bringing us, or that holds, and we don't agree with those. And I think that's indicative of a little bit of capability that comes on the heels of us being coming out and talking about this. And so I think that's another example where we have some other countries that are doing that.
Great, thank you. It appears to me that China is committed to strengthening its position in the South China Sea, regardless of what the United States says and does. Both through the deployment of conventional military forces, we've seen them develop the islands, promise not to militarize them, militarize them, and through the use of its maritime militia. China very successfully deploys its fishing fleets in a paramilitary fashion. It looks very similar to what we've seen with Russia in the Ukraine, except, what do they call these ones? Little gray men, I think, in terms of the Chinese fishing boats, right? So this all leads me to wonder, what is it that the U.S. hopes to achieve through its approach to the region in light of China's willingness to kind of use what seems like almost every option on the table to ensure its claim?
Good question, Alex. And I don't want to sound like a broken record here a little bit, but I would argue that it comes right back down to, for us in Indo-PACOM, a free and open Indo-Pacific. And, as we work in competition militarily, I would say, you've got to be present to win, right? And so you can't compete if you're just thinking about it, right? The analogy I always just say is like, hey, we have a great basketball game and it's 5-on-5, but if nobody comes, it's 5-on-0, and there's not going to be any sort of competition there. And so when you get to that piece, I would argue that what we're trying to do is ensure that waterway, as an example, like I talked about earlier, that this is indicative of free and open, rules-based international order. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but that's where we want to be, and that's assurance of our allies. That's deterrence of China to continue to build that up, and working through that is where we're going, and that's kind of the policy. So that we can have full, prosperous countries in the region, and access to those commons by anyone in law-faring countries. So that's where I'd say on that.
Thank you, Admiral. Ms. Glasser?
If you took that down a few thousand feet to just some specifics, and of course I'm completely in agreement with that, we obviously want to persuade China to stop harassing the other claimants, to allow them to have access to their resources. We want China to align its policies and actions with the July 2016 ruling. We certainly don't want them to be establishing baselines in the Spratlys, which they have already done in the Paracels illegally. In 1996, they drew straight baselines around the Paracel Islands. We don't want China declaring an air defense identification zone over the area, which we have heard some Chinese experts talk about. We'd like them to manage their disputes peacefully and resolve them in accordance with international law.
Yeah, and I just hop on with Ms. Glasser there, which is a great segue into some of the things that China has done just over the last 2 months, right? Which people lose sight of, but they, whether you're ramming a Vietnam fishing vessel, there were just just a week and a half ago, 4 medium-range ballistic missiles launched into the South China Sea militarily. There was a whole lot of work done by China just 2 months ago down in the Malaysian EEZ with them harassing their exploration ship, and as they're working through their attempt to harvest oil. They continue to increase military operations in the vicinity of Taiwan and operate largely in the South China Sea. That's on the military side. Diplomatically, they've claimed 2 new administrative districts, which kind of encompass paracels and all those things. And these are, as we mentioned, just on the buildup of Fiery Cross Reef over the last 5 years continues to be, hey, this is going to be set up for humanitarian reasons and all these things. And now we're deploying airplanes there, militarily postured on the South China Sea. And this is just the continued piece. We have to remember that island didn't exist. That was built. And it was built at the expense environmentally of the fishing and all of the coral reefs around it, and absolutely devastating to that particular piece. And there continues to be China's movement, and we're in the South China Sea here, not along the line of actual control in India. We're not going to talk specifically about land disputes in Bhutan. Certainly Hong Kong's on the South China Sea, but continued work in Hong Kong. So there's a lot of continued push by the PRC to unilaterally grab, and it's not in line with any international law at all. So I think they do a great job of working to deflect this responsibility, and we have to continue to be there and highlight the fact that their malign work is very clear, and it's affecting all of those partners that are having to do some level of hedge economically. And as a leader in the world, we can be there and are there so that we can keep the South China Sea a calm place, as Ms. Glaser said. In the end, there's no desire for conflict with China, and we've got to take stands with that now. And so I think that all those things are important.
Thank you. This is an anonymous attendee's question. I think it's kind of relevant to the conversation, so I'm going to go ahead and weave it in here, which is, how far is the United States actually willing to go in order to prevent China from extending its territorial claims in the South China Sea? Does China take U.S. assertions seriously? Ms. Glaser, do you want to start on that one?
Well, I would start by saying that the United States has treaty obligations to the Philippines. If a Filipino vessel or member of the Philippine Armed Forces is attacked by China, we are under obligation to come to their defense. So I think that our commitments are clear under that treaty. The situation is somewhat grayer in the case of some of these other countries. We do not have treaty commitments to the other claimants in the South China Sea. So it is unclear exactly what we would do if China were to use military force, for example, to dislodge Vietnamese forces from one of their features. I don't personally expect that they're going to do that, but we cannot rule out that kind of contingency. So I think that the United States has made clear what its interests are. It is stepping up in important ways to deter Chinese aggression. But when you talk about our commitments, I see that as commitments generally to peace and stability in the region, yes, but particularly our treaty commitments are only to one of those countries.
Great, thanks so much. Go ahead.
I'd comment on that, and I'm in agreement with Ms. Glaser there, and I don't, treaties certainly, as she laid out, are clear, and I think, the policy direction from Washington and all those things would be in line with what she said writ large. I would also say that, this is an example of, we have to continue to be postured within that region in an effort for deterrence, right? I don't personally want to go to the fight, right? The whole point would be is that we don't want to get there. But you've got to be ready to be there should that happen. And so our whole mantra here is to win before fighting. Keep the international rules-based order that is a benefit for all in the South China Sea and writ large in the Indo-Pacific, viable, and that comes with the ability to, from a deterrent standpoint, be ready to go do those things, and then we can have all of the policymakers and all those things continue to work to make it all a better place.
Admiral, you mentioned the kind of rules-based international order. I'm kind of curious here because I think we often only hear about what the United States is doing in the region. So I'd be curious to hear from you to what extent are nations outside of the region stepping up to uphold freedom of the seas and the enforcement of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. Is this something the United States is going alone at, or have we managed to kind of build a coalition of countries who are eager to see this region remain free and open?
Yeah, great question, Alex. So I've been in this job here as the operations director for 2.5 years now. My last deployment through the region was in 2017. And as I was sailing in the South China Sea as a strike group commander there was the United States in the South China Sea, and as other partners were in there, and there were some, there was a little bit of reluctance to sail with us. That's just personal anecdote. As I look now on what has happened in the 2.5 years I've been here, which is not a result of me, I just happen to be here executing some operations. But there's been a very strong freedom of navigation operations within the United States. And so that the audience and everybody understands, freedom of navigation is not about the South China Sea and the Paracel Islands and about the Spratly Islands and poking China. It's about maritime claims that are claimed by multiple countries. There are maritime claims that are challenged via freedom of navigation, writ large around the world. The ones that are a little highlighted here are in the South China Sea because of China's insistence on having these claims. So the United States has been very forthright in its freedom of navigation. What that's done in the last couple years is increased and given some legitimacy to all of the sailing within the South China Sea and in the 9-dash line. And so specifically in the last couple years, whether it's Australia, Great Britain, Canada, France, these are all sailing within the South China Sea up and through. Our partners down in the south of Australia, just on their way to RIMPAC most recently, sailed through the South China Sea and continue to do that. And so I think we're seeing all of those countries step up in the 9-dash line specifically, and as they work through specifics of their internal politics or what have you, you may see freedom navigations, maybe not in the same way that we do, but certainly there's been a big step up of allies and partners in the South China Sea.
Thank you. Ms. Glasser, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would just add, and I'm sure the Admiral could elaborate on this as well, that there are other countries that are trying to help the Southeast Asians and the other claimants to build maritime capacity, to know what's going on inside their exclusive economic zones, to have the awareness and then be able to deter Chinese harassment of their vessels. And Japan in particular is working with the United States to build this maritime capacity in countries. And so you find the United States and Japan, and I think maybe even Korea, if I'm not mistaken, providing some of their ships that we are no longer using to those countries. That they're now using as their law enforcement vessels. Obviously, many of these countries do training with countries in the region as well. And I would also highlight that right after the announcement of the U.S. policy shift in July, that Australia submitted a declaration to the United Nations rejecting China's claim to historic rights as well in the South China Sea, referencing the drawing of straight baselines in particular. That if that were to occur in the Spratlys, that would be illegal. So we've really seen a lot of countries step up in just the last year, as the Admiral mentioned.
Great. In the course of answering this question, y'all have touched upon 3 of the 4 members of the Quad. India, Japan, Australia, and the United States. India is the one we haven't heard anything about. I'd be curious to hear, what role is India playing to work with the South China Sea claimants to counter Chinese actions in the region? And this question actually comes from an audience. It's from Anupam Lada. So thank you for that question. Very relevant.
Yeah, I'd comment just briefly from an operational standpoint. We've seen India just in the last few months sail within the South China Sea. They were just part of operations in and around on the western side of the Straits of Malacca, and there's continued work to have an exercise here that we've done over the last few years, and with Japan, India, and the United States, and we'll see if Australia comes in there on the Quad side. More to follow there. I think India continues to be interested in the region. I think certainly some of the incursions and the line of actual control have empowered them of late, but it was before that they were very involved and continue to work exercises with us, and as I said, sailed certainly in the South China Sea even most recently.
Thank you. Ms. Glasser, how would you characterize China's approach to the region? What is it that they're hoping to achieve? From where I'm sitting, their approach has been counterintuitive. They've kind of come in, they've been aggressive, they've pushed countries away that I think are eager to be close to China for economic reasons. Why this combative approach and not a collaborative one?
The Chinese stance on sovereignty has always been firm. It has become even tougher under Xi Jinping, where we have heard him say that China should never give up an inch of territory. And he has said that China must take back all of the territory, and including maritime spaces that have been taken from it. So if you look at China's behavior around the region when it comes to sovereignty, whether we're talking about the Senkakus that are disputed with Japan or the border with India and certainly Taiwan, you can see that China's approach has become more assertive. So broadly speaking, I would say that China seeks to persuade or even compel other countries to accommodate to Chinese interests, to certainly refrain from unilateral development of energy resources, acknowledge China's rights to jurisdiction in the South China Sea, and eventually accede sovereignty to China where that sovereignty is disputed. And I would note here that there have been negotiations underway between China and the 10 members of ASEAN on a code of conduct. And it was very interesting to me when there was a 0 draft that was circulated among all the members of ASEAN and China, and every country had the opportunity to insert language that it wanted to modify. And China attempted to insert in the draft language that would prevent any of the signatories, in other words, all 10 members of ASEAN, from conducting military exercises with outside powers. It would prevent any of the countries from signing contracts with foreign companies, other than, of course, Chinese companies, to develop energy. And to me, that was very concrete evidence of China's goal. It wants to push foreign military powers, especially the United States, out of the region. It doesn't want foreign companies to be engaged in energy exploitation. It simply wants China to dominate in that area. And so that's very, very telling to me and indisputable what their goals are.
Thank you. Admiral, anything to add to that?
I would be in complete agreement with Ms. Glasser there. I mean, I think they're on a level of, hey, might makes right, and there is no doubt that they have a strong desire to have the regional hegemony, specifically under the China-based rules that they establish. And that's not consistent with international law. It's consistent for the betterment and desires of China. And the code of conduct that Ms. Glasser talked about is a specific example, exactly right. That is, desire to be here and own it alone. And I don't think that's in line with what allies and partners, like-minded, all the comments that we've talked about are all about. And so it's interesting that I think they in China in this light are making it us versus them, and that's not the way we're doing that.
Is there any sign that China's rethinking its approach to the South China Sea? If you're sitting in Beijing, what you've seen is that Vietnam, a country the United States was at war with not long ago, 500,000 U.S. soldiers deployed in this country fighting the Vietnamese. You see this country now welcoming the United States, buying U.S. military equipment, such as P-3s, and having visits from the U.S. military with increasing frequency. I think if I was there, I'd be asking, what is it that we're doing that is pushing these countries closer to the United States, and how should we be adjusting our policies, our approach to the region to make sure that we're not incentivizing these countries to build a formal relationship with the United States, such as an alliance or some kind of security agreement. So I'd be curious to hear, has Beijing really rethought their approach or shown any signs that they are willing to change their current course?
Yeah, I'll top on it initially. I mean, I would say here in the last bit, no. I mean, I don't think that China is doing any difference here. It's an interesting thing. Every time we do RIMPAC, I think China looks around and says, I'm here all alone. I don't have allies. And how does this work? And so they continue to push to try to be the leader in their own mind in this region and malignly go through all of this stuff. And the acceleration of all of the policies in Hong Kong is an example. I don't think there's a bit of policy that's slowing them down at all. I think that they are trying to accelerate and force compliance through malign influence throughout the region into Oceania writ large. And so I don't see any change in policy at the moment. And I think we have to continue to work our policies of the visions that we've talked about here. I'm not going to continue to say it, and be steadfast and work very clearly with allies and partners here in the region to counter that. And to get back to the point of, there's a whole bunch of levels of power, that can be executed here and preparatory. And I think the United States most recently in its economic policies towards China and its change in diplomatic that we talked about with Secretary Pompeo, and then now in addition with continued work in the military sphere, is an effort to ensure that the region is postured here and the allies and partners are assured, and that the United States is here in an effort to prevent any sort of conflict. That's how I think that the policies now and the elements of power are being used, and well.
Great, thank you. And I want to note that we've got you for 3 more minutes. I'm going to toss a question quickly to Ms. Glazer, and then I think we can hear any closing remarks you'd have, Admiral. So if you want to think on that while I have Bonnie respond to this. Ms. Glazer, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like China's stance has helped the U.S. position in the region. Is that an accurate takeaway?
I think that the more aggressive that China has become, as I said earlier, we have seen some enhanced willingness to push back by other countries, but they're not coordinating and working well together, which is unfortunate because I think that they would be more effective if they coordinated together. If all of the other claimants were to settle their own sovereignty disputes over maritime entitlements, and accept the outcome of the July 2016 ruling and pursue a collaborative approach toward China, I think that they might have a more opportunity to push back against China. And so I would agree with the Admiral that there's just been no real change in Chinese policies. They remain quite confident that over time that every country in the region will accede to their growing power. And that's economic power, of course, as well as military power. So even though from the perspective of where I sit, some of China's actions have helped the United States, I don't think that that's a question that the Chinese ask themselves. They are looking to advance their own interest. They are willing to tolerate some level of friction with other countries in the region, including with the United States, in order to advance toward the goal of national rejuvenation. This is Xi Jinping's Chinese dream, as stated, to be achieved by 2049. And Xi Jinping certainly hopes to advance sovereignty in all of the spaces where it is disputed towards what is in China's favor. So I don't think we have to look broader than just what maybe you and I think are the effects of China's policies.
Terrific, thank you. Admiral Koehler, before you step off, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? Any important takeaways, anything that they must or should hear from you before you go?
Yeah, I would, as a military guy, I want to just be very clear that at Indo-PACOM specifically, 100% committed to the free and open Indo-Pacific. And on the military side, for the things that I can do to be postured to support that, to ensure that I can be ready to fight and win in an effort to ensure that we can win before fighting, and there's no desire here to take this to some conflict, but very strongly, to get to Ms. Glazer's point that she just made, this is China trying to exert their unilateral self-interest, which is not in the interest of everyone else around the South China Sea. And Indo-PACOM is 100% committed to be here and assure all those allies that we're here in an effort to deter China. And I hope to be part of all of these implements of power to get them to realize that there's a strong group of people here and countries here that want to flourish and live under the rules-based order that we have for the last 70 years. And it's been prosperous, and I don't think in the vision of China it would be that way. So I appreciate the opportunity today, and I apologize, as I said, that I have to step out here. So certainly to you, Alex, thank you for the opportunity to address the group today, and being synchronized with Bonnie Glazer here. It's been pretty awesome. Look forward to doing that again. So I really appreciate the time.
Well, it was a privilege to have you. Thank you on behalf of the Pacific Council. Thank you on behalf of Jerry Green, our president and CEO, and thank you on behalf of the Edgerton Foundation, which underwrites this series. So really, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all that you do.
Okay, well, great. Thank you. I'm sorry I have to step out.
Take care. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Ms. Glaser, I'd be kind of curious, to what extent has joint development been explored as a solution to the competing territorial claims of the region? Is that something any of the claimants are actively participating in or considering? I know it's something that China has actually participated in, or at least explored in the past, but I haven't heard anything about it recently. Is there any movement on that front?
So I would start by saying that there's been commercial joint development agreements between some of the claimants. Malaysia and Vietnam have a commercial joint development agreement. Also, Vietnam and Thailand have, this is not the South China Sea, but they're members of Southeast Asia. They have overlapping claims in the gas-rich Gulf of Thailand. And so they have a commercial joint development arrangement. But embedded in these existing commercial pacts are production sharing agreements. So this means that the rights of each country to develop and utilize oil and gas are managed by their respective national oil companies. So those are just examples within ASEAN of joint development agreements. And then specifically, I would cite the agreement that was signed, which really is just an MOU between China and the Philippines. And that expresses their willingness to explore joint development. But there are some concerns within the Philippines about whether joint development would be consistent with the Philippines Constitution. And so there really has been no progress in that regard. And so there are no arrangements yet. There's no joint development yet between China and the Philippines or China and Vietnam. And I don't believe there's been any with Malaysia or Indonesia either.
Great, thank you. Question from our audience. This question comes from Captain Eric Chang. What is your position on the U.S. using free trade pacts in the region as a counterbalance to China? Would China's military and maritime actions look different today if the U.S. had not withdrawn from the TPP?
Well, it's always difficult to go back and change one variable and examine whether that would have changed the outcome. But I personally think that the free trade pact, like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was a potential strategic move that the U.S. could have joined, and that it would have shown China that the Western and countries, and of course it's not only democratic countries, because Vietnam is a member of the CPTPP, but it would show that other countries were not willing to let China set the rules, and that others were determined to stand up for their own view of the rules-based order. Now, whether that would have changed what China is doing in the South China Sea is really a big question mark, because there are other elements that China would have taken into account in its decision-making, and particularly the growth of its Coast Guard forces, maritime militia ships, its Navy, the fact that members of ASEAN were not working very strongly together to push back against China, and maybe even the fact that the United States was seen as not doing enough other than freedom of navigation operations, that would have factored into China's decision-making as well. But I do share your view that I think is implicit in your question, that the US decision to withdraw from the TPP was a strategic mistake, and that it did, I believe, weaken the US position in our competition with China.
Thank you so much. This question comes from Vahid Khorsand. What steps are the US and its allies taking to reduce the creation of an Iraq/Kuwait, meaning that what are we doing to not passively imply China can invade a smaller/weaker neighbor?
I'm not completely sure I understand the question, but I think
From
it's
the question is, are we doing anything to discourage China from taking actions against countries, that are weaker than it, that the United States doesn't have a treaty alliance or some kind of defense agreement with?
So I really think the most important case here, because the questioner did use the term invade. And I think the most important and relevant case here is not in the South China Sea, it is Taiwan. And this is potentially the most dangerous contingency in the region because China does lay claim over Taiwan and because the United States does not have a treaty commitment. And there is currently a debate underway about whether what has been in the past a position of strategic ambiguity, which means that the United States doesn't say if China attacks Taiwan, what it would do, whether it would respond or how it would respond, that now that position should be more clear, maybe even something called strategic clarity, that the United States would say in advance that it would definitely come to Taiwan's aid under all circumstances. So what's being done, of course, is to try and shore up U.S. capability to defend Taiwan, to make at least our position credible. And there are discussions about whether we have to strengthen our declaratory policy as well. But we're doing a lot of things to strengthen U.S. relations with Taiwan across the board and to make sure that deterrence is credible. And this is very important going forward, I think, because Xi Jinping has made clear time and again that reunification, as he calls it, is a priority for Beijing.
Well, thank you for that. We are about at time. Ms. Glaser, are there any takeaways our audience should hear from you?
Well, I think one of the takeaways would be that we should be paying very close attention to the way that China treats its neighbors. We should be strengthening deterrence. We should be ensuring we not only abide by international law, but we encourage other countries to do so. I like your question about joining the Convention on the Law of the Sea. I hope we will do that going forward. And the rules-based order is extremely important to the countries of the region. In the South China Sea, we have to care about more than just freedom of navigation, and we have to consistently pay attention to Southeast Asia overall. These countries cannot rise or fall on the list of priorities of the United States in the region. We have to be there to engage with these Southeast Asian countries frequently, and we have to show up at multilateral meetings at high levels, which in this administration we have really not done consistently. So in order to be credible in the eyes of countries in the region, we have to have a more consistent policy.
Great, thank you. Invaluable note for our audience and something I personally agree with. So thank you for that, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us. It was really a privilege to have the opportunity to interview both you and the Admiral. And I know I'm speaking for all of our members in the Pacific Council when I say thank you so much, and that we really all learned a lot today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Take care.